Yo, 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 what is up, brothers and sisters? Guys, lot to take in on the markets the last couple days. We finally had the pullback that, a lot of people have been waiting for. Let's dig into what is happening in the stock market and then what is the game plan for the coming week, what stocks could be longed and what stocks could be potentially shorted. And let's start really diving into the, what's happening. So, as you guys have already know, right, we spent an inordinate time above your EMAs for the last couple months, probably one of the longer periods that I've seen in my career. We rode up the bone zone for months, guys. I mean, that's just a rare bird. Like, if you come this day here, this is the end of April, we got up the bone zone, and we finally broke under, right, in basically August. I mean, that's a long damn time, right? So, we finally had some volatility in the markets. And so now the question becomes what happens next. So to me, ideally, I think a great spot if we can get into this 50-day moving average zone. I think that's going to be a nice reset for quite a lot of stocks. Even though the indices have only been down like 2 days in a row, you see like a lot of momentum stocks. They've actually been down 5, 6, 7 days in a row because of the SPY. You can see here, right? The SPY's really been down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days in a row. And the IWM itself has been down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days in a row. So, I think if we gap down tomorrow and the Qs can get into that, right, 50-day moving average, or maybe not even a gap down, but just a little flush down at the open, that would really set up some nice plays as you've got like an oversold reading in the IWM. And a lot of like the kind of momentum stocks have pulled back significantly in the last few days. And so I think we have, a good opportunity. If the market opens up strong, it'll be in a really weird spot. I'm not sure what the play would be. If we fill some of this gap into this, I would be leaning towards fading and kind of trying to get this thing back down into this zone here. The market needs a pull, guys. I mean, it just needs it, right? And a lot of the gains have been kind of concentrating some of the bigger names. The smaller names have been pulling back the last, week or two. So let's see. Let's, hope we get give it a gap down here, even into the lower Bollinger Band. I think for a day or even a few hours would give us a really nice kind of push. But yeah, I think the big setup is if we can kind of get this thing here, because that would really put a stretch on the IWM too. That would be, lower Bollinger Band. That really set up a nice, setup on that. And then, of course, the SPY itself is also right down 5 days in a row. And really, we're about 10 points away from the 50-day moving average. And so if we can get there, that's going to set up some really good longs. Guys, most likely, I don't think that the bull market is over, but we've needed this pullback for a long time. Even if it lasts longer than the 50-day moving average, I don't believe that would, crush the bull market. We need the pullback because we just haven't had one in so long. And so when you get a run like this, by the way, your first deep pullback almost always gets bought because there's been all these people here, myself included in some of my longer accounts, that's like, man, am I chasing this market? Am I chasing this market? Let me wait for a pullback. You'll have a lot of people positioned that way on a longer term basis. And so, we definitely want to just kind of be mindful that, the first big dip, like you come into somewhere into this zone, like, man, that's getting most likely bought up in absence of really something catastrophic. So I would ignore the noise. I know that the Fed didn't do much, but they didn't say anything that was any different than what they always say. I know the jobs number was somewhat abysmal on Friday. Now look, what does that even mean? Somewhat abysmal, right? That's just a big word salad of nothing. Like, who are we to even know what that stuff means? We follow the price action and keep the opinions to ourselves, unless we're with our buddies and we're talking shop and we want to sound real smart, right? But everybody knows it's all lies when we say it, right? So we're not economists. We don't know what all that stuff means. Let's get this thing to the 50 and let's go have some fun, all right? Look, beyond that, there's been, like, if you do a 5-day sort here, you could see there was really nowhere to hide. The VIX finally pushed through. You know, guys, the VIX had been making like kind of the volatility had gotten to like almost a ridiculously low level that almost always kind of sets up a momentarily pop. And, you know, so you're just going to see volatility rise a little bit too. I think that's probably a good thing. Oil was up a little bit last week, but oil stock got really faded off too. So I don't know if there's anything in there. Utility sector still hanging out pretty good. You can see gold did a remount. Guys, I do not believe, even though the gold, you know, busted lower for a hot second down into this 300 support, I do not believe that the gold rally is over, even though it's just basing out for a long period of time. You know, if you look at silver too, like I think both of these are in probably some prime time positions to get bought up. There's two different things. Look, if inflation goes down, right? Inflation goes down and they cut rates, that's probably going to push gold. If nothing else happens, and you know the U.S. government just keeps running budget deficits and all that kind of stuff too, and you know they don't cut rates, gold's probably still going to go up, and silver itself too, because if you look at the charts just on a longer term basis, right, these are very rare breakouts, and so you can't discount them like, hey, if this happens, this happens. Like if you're looking at just how long the bases are in this, like you got to trust that action and trust your eyes on that. And you can see here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a row. Like came down into 50. I mean, that's like a prime time bounce spot. I think that if that happens, you know, we can come in and do that. And, you know, there's not that many, you know, gold miners. But, like, this was one I was looking at in my IRA. You know, like, you've had a nice orderly pullback over here. There's only a few silver miners out there left. SWM. Let me see here. Going here. If you go to the MJ to the 6. Hold on, let me see here. Bum, 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 silver. Bum, 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 legacy group. There it goes. Right, you can see like something like this also, right? You know. So like not like same thing with gold. I think these are going to be like industry. See, there's only a couple of these, right? Like you got AG. I think these are going to be definitely somewhat playable on the swing trading side. They're not really day traders, so you know. But like these are still some big breakouts that are happening here. So keep an eye on those. You know, there's a lot of interesting kind of subcurrents happening here that we should be mindful of. I think the rest of the indexes are kind of like the SMH is just mirroring the QQQs, like the QQQs is just mirroring NVIDIA. Mags, you can see, starting to pull back here. And then everything else just kind of looks like blah. Like, I wouldn't say anything looks like any index looks that great. You can see the Dow Jones is on the 50-day moving average and the lower Bollinger Band. So my gut feeling is if we gap down tomorrow, we're probably going to bounce. You can see this is RSP, the 50, the equal weight S&P 500. So give me a gap down. I think we probably bounce a little bit. If we gap up or have a flat open, most likely I would, you know, in absence of news, we probably see a little bit more weakness. Let me just say something on the other side of things. So in these kind of markets where you're like unable to read the indexes, stick with the news plays, the earnings plays. Guys, there have been some freaking heaters on the earnings side. You know, every day there's been stocks that have been tradable to the upside on earnings. And these are going to be, if you're a swing trader, this is where you like want to be. This is the list that you want to be looking for, right? Any of these kind of see big gap up earnings that are clearing out some levels, right? That did on some big volume, right? And if you're having orderly pullbacks, I think these are good, like something like this. eBay's, guys, a breakout to all-time highs, you know. PI is another one here. XYL. You know, BE, I've been waiting for a pullback on this one for a while. If we get this down into the, you know, bottom of the bone zone, I think that would be really good. Rambus is testing its support here. You know, if we get a bounce in semiconductors. CDNS was a big-time breakout, too. Look at this thing, right? So you're pulling back all just nice and orderly here. You get these things into these bone zones, I think it's going to be a nice potential opportunity. Same thing with CLS. Look at WDC also, right? Big stick on this thing, a breakout to all-time high. So, there's I get a huge list of these bad boys. There's 20, 30 really good ones. So keep an eye on some of those. Look at this. RKT, I think it held up really nice. 58.6 million shares of volume. I think this is, top of the list tomorrow if we're looking for longs. Same thing with Reddit. Joby's got a nice breakout setting up right here. Let's add that to the list. LC, I think, really good relative strength. Yesterday, market's taking a little Cleveland steamer on, the Bulls' faces, and you got yourself this holding up real nice and orderly. DoorDash actually sucks the trade. Take that off. Boom, 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 boom. By the way, so like if the IWM gaps down like a decent size tomorrow, for example, I'll look to do some calls, maybe end of the week calls or something like that to try to bounce this thing. Now the 200-day moving average has been breached, so like I wouldn't, play it back up to here, but if we get down into here, then I'll play it back into somewhere into the zone here. It's a rare that you get, these like big kind of breaks below the lower Bollinger Bands. AMD, some weakness down here. If we can get this into the bone zone, look, it hasn't tested into the bone in a little bit of time, so maybe we get a bounce. The earnings are coming up, so it might be a nothing burger at this point. If the IWM bounces, then this NNE is right on the 50-day moving average. Same thing with SMAR, right? If it gets to the 50-day moving average, I think those could be potential bounces. Now, look, these things can bleed off like a mother trucker, right? If the market is truly kind of hit a short-term top, which we don't know, right? My thinking is the first dip is going to get bought, but I've been wrong numerous times, every day actually. So, hey, if the market gets bought, then I think some of these will be nice bounces off the 50, like this one or NNE. If the market keeps fading off, then frankly, these have, a shitload of room to fall, right? So just got to be mindful of that. Remember the playbook from like the tariff month, like where like everything, how things bleeded off? That'll be a good one. Hey, Coin, nasty little earnings out on this one too. I think this is probably, right, a primetime candidate. Like if you kind of just have a really light open, probably a refade on this one. MSTR, same thing. You get a light open on this one, probably a refade. It's got, I think the bounce on this will be at the 200-day moving average. This company's a pig, though. Like, it's a pig, right? So, they already have their earnings out, too, it looks like. So, it was a dog with fleas, for sure. And if it's a little too expensive, they have MSTU, which is the, like a little ETF. And then they have, like, MSTX, I believe, and MSTZ, which is, like, the inverse. So they got like these like cheaper ones here. Like, so if you want to short MSTR, you can use this MSTZ. It's a little bit cheaper. For me, I've never noticed that cheaper means easier to trade, right? It's easier for me to see the big candles than the little candles. A couple more faders, I think. Look, this core weave, every bounce on this, every gap up on this has been faded off for weeks. Let's... It's doing a little bear flag here. If this opens up down over here, let's try to fade that piggy. Circle, man, this was my moneymaker on Friday. We took this like a opening tick as it broke the pre-market low, pre-market range. Dudes, like we had this thing looking juicy. Looking juicy. So I think this one's got probably a good... this thing's probably got a good little thing on it, too. And look, if it keeps breaking down, as long as it keeps taking out the previous day's lows, and you can see here, like an hourly chart, you're just clearing out all these levels. I think that's a nice little breakdown over here. And this thing's a pig, too, right? Like, if Coin can't hold, MSTR can't hold, what's Circle's going to do it, right? Dude, come on. So, that one's a pig. If the market starts to, firm up and we're looking for longs. AMSC had this huge day, and then we just had an inside day. That's a tight, narrow range day after a big up day. I think that could be in the cards for a potential long. OUST, this was $32. You pull back $10 now. Let's see if we bounce off the 50-day moving average there. its earnings are coming out too, and this is probably, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing this is probably, this company does less revenues than I do. Right? So, you know, I wouldn't step in front of that, but for a day trade, sure. Let's like look at that one. I think that could have a nice little doohickey on it too. So stick with like these kind of like these earnings plays like RKT or Reddit, or even Joby had news out right on Friday. And you have all these names here too. If you're trying to long, look for things with catalysts. If you're short, look for the weak structure kind of breakdowns, like the high flyers that are big turds, bear flags, you know, all that kind of fun stuff. And dude, I'll be live in the Boom Boom Room tomorrow. So I love you guys. Peace.